of allegiance of a new member. Announcements by the presiding officer.
Members, I wish to make the following announcements. 1. Pursuant to Section 19(1) Part B of the Tobago House of Assembly Act Number 40 of 1996, the presiding officer, Dr. Denise Soyafat Angus, submitted a written resignation to the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. In accordance with Sections 20, Part 1 and 20, Part 2 of the aforementioned Act, I advise formally that a vacancy exists in the membership of the Assembly, with effect from today's date, the 20th of November 2019. Secondly, I wish to advise that the Secretaries of Community Development, Enterprise Development and Labor, and Tourism and Culture has submitted a written apology for absence from today's sitting.
Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet. Assembly laws brought back from Parliament. Petitions. Papers. Presentation of reports from Dispute Resolution Commission. Questions to secretaries. Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. Statements by secretaries or assistant secretaries. Personal explanations. Introduction of bills. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Assembly and moved by a secretary or assistant secretary. Public business, executive council business, private business. Motion.
Secretary of Finance and the Economy.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer. Let me start at the onset to extend sincere congratulations and best wishes to you on the elevated role you were asked to assume in this honorable House. And I have no doubt that you will be effective in managing the sometimes heated debates that occur from time to time in this august chamber. Let me also publicly thank the former presiding officer, Dr. Denise Soyafat Angus, for the commitment, professionalism, and objectivity she demonstrated during her time in this chamber. I should thank her publicly for her service to the people of Tobago. And again, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, congratulations on your elevated role. But, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, before I get into the substantive motion, I am requesting leave of Standing Order 42.6 and Standing Order 50.1, given the conventions established in this motion, as it sometimes is viewed as the second budget. So I'll be reading extensively, and accordingly I may just go over the allotted time, but not by much, just a couple of minutes. But Mr. Presiding Officer, the motion that is before us this morning says, whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, in accordance with Section 41 of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, debated, approved, and submitted within the stipulated time its estimates of revenue and expenditure for fiscal 2020 to the Cabinet. And whereas the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly in fiscal 2020 totaled $2.29 billion, or 4.34% of the national budget, an increase of $54 million, or 2.4% over the previous year. And whereas in accordance with Section 25(2) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, the Executive Council is mandated to do all in its powers to manage the affairs of Tobago and to advance the island's sustainable development mandate. Be it resolved that this House accept the policy measures and recommendations outlined by the Executive Council to manage the financial resources of the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2020 in order to accelerate the island's developmental momentum. And be it further resolved that this House supports the plans of the Executive Council to advance the island's socio-economic development. This morning, the Deputy Presiding Officer, in my capacity as Secretary of Finance and the Economy, it is once again my distinct pleasure to stand before this Honorable House to present this important motion which deals with the reallocation of the budgetary resources of the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2020. When I introduced this motion to this Honorable House in 2013 as part of the overall budgetary process of the Tobago House of Assembly, the primary objective was to share with the people of Tobago and the wider national community the adjustments to the fiscal priorities of the Tobago House of Assembly in response to the budgetary funding gaps emanating from the national budget approved by the Parliament. Today, this motion has become one of the most anticipated features in our annual budgetary exercise. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, as I have said on numerous occasions, but I think it bears repeating, that the intent of this motion is not to present a new Tobago House of Assembly budget or to table revised estimates. Our intent is decidedly to indicate the priority programs and projects of the Assembly for fiscal 2020 in view of our budgetary allocations. We also take this opportunity to highlight the strategies the Assembly proposes to undertake to maintain the island's developmental momentum, and in so doing, affirm our commitment to enhance the standard of living and the quality of life of all Tobagonians. The Deputy Presiding Officer, it is the view of this administration that development is primarily about the people and improving their standard of living and quality of life. This administration is deeply committed to the prudent management of the budgetary resources of the Assembly so that there can be material improvements in the standard of living and quality of life of all Tobagonians. We do all this in the context of our new draft medium-term policy and planning framework that was developed to guide our developmental activities on the island over the next few years. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, my presentation today follows some broad thematic areas. I will begin by examining the international, regional, and national economic environment to set the context for today's fiscal adjustment measures for 2020. I will also look at Tobago's development needs and strategic priorities for fiscal 2020 as outlined in the 2020 Tobago House of Assembly's budget statement, as well as the draft medium-term policy planning framework. Next, I will examine the extent of the budgetary funding gap of the Assembly following the parliamentary appropriations from the central government in the national budget. Following this, I will discuss our proposed fiscal adjustments and strategic priorities for fiscal 2020, given the Assembly's allocation. I will then examine some of our proposed strategies to curtail expenditure and to enhance revenues. Thereafter, I will conclude my presentation. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, in my last budget presentation, I pointed to the high levels of uncertainty caused by geopolitical and trade tensions which were dampening global growth. Since then, the situation has not improved. In fact, it has worsened. The protests in Hong Kong have intensified and have become violent. There have been protests in Chile and more recently in Colombia. In Bolivia, the president, Evo Morales, demitted office and fled the country seeking refuge in Mexico. The situation in Venezuela remains stalemated. In Brazil, former President Lula da Silva has been released from prison, and general elections in Canada have returned a minority government for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. This is a result because of his tarnished image in a recent corruption scandal. Israel is likely to have yet another general election, as no party has been able to form a government. The UK, with a new prime minister, will have a general election in December. However, this election is unlikely to resolve the Brexit crisis. And while in the United States, with less than a year until the next presidential elections, the push for the possible impeachment of the president is now dominating the political agenda there. The Deputy Presiding Officer, as a consequence of the trade war and these geopolitical factors, business investment has slowed, and therefore global growth has slowed, with the IMF now projecting 3.0% growth in 2019, with a possibility of a slightly better outturn in 2020 of 3.4%. The growth outturn has been sustained by historically low levels of unemployment and consumption spending, even as business investment has been more cautious. Monetary policy has remained accommodating as inflationary pressures are weak. The United States Federal Reserve, which had been expected to increase interest rates, reversed course in light of slowing growth and heightened uncertainty. Interest rates remain at historically low levels and negative in real terms in many markets. The Deputy Presiding Officer, weak global growth has affected the growth prospects of tourism-dependent economies in the region. However, Jamaica has continued to improve its overall economic performance as it emerged from a protracted series of IMF programs with improved debt-to-GDP ratios, a stronger fiscal position, and positive growth. The Barbados economy, on the other hand, continues to be weak even as it entered into its IMF program and completed a successful domestic debt exchange. In Guyana, there has been more oil discoveries, with production set to commence in 2020. However, the domestic political situation remains fraught following the no-confidence vote since upheld by the Caribbean Court of Justice and the setting of the March 2020 for the general elections. Mr. Presiding Officer, excuse me. Crude oil and natural gas prices have declined from the highs of the third quarter of 2018. The West Texas Intermediate price has traded in the mid-50s for most of 2019, while the Henry Hub price of natural gas has declined steadily over the course of the year. Despite constraints on supplies from Venezuela and Iran, oversupply conditions globally have been conducive to low prices, while global demand for energy has also assisted in this regard. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, in Trinidad and Tobago, crude oil production has continued to decline, averaging 59,303 barrels per day in the first 7 months of 2019, compared with an average daily production in 2018 of 63,570 barrels of oil per day. Natural gas production in 2019 up to July was averaging 3.65 billion cubic feet per day compared to an average daily production of 3.63 billion cubic feet per day in 2018. This suggests that the declines over the previous years have been halted, but have not been reversed. There have been positive announcements of discoveries in deep waters by BHT Billiton in shallow waters, and in shallow waters by BPTT, but this will take several years before the deep water gas can be brought into production. The slow recovery of the energy sector has impacted the recovery of the non-energy economy. The economy declined by 1% in 2018 as the energy sector contracted by 4.4%. The Deputy Presiding Officer, you will recall that for fiscal 2020, the Tobago House of Assembly requested a total of $4.83 billion from the central government, of which $3.26 billion was requested for recurrent expenditure, and $1.45 billion was requested for development program expenditures. $73.3 million was requested for URP, and $39.2 million was requested for CPEP. However, the budgetary allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for this fiscal year totaled $2.29 billion, of which $2.03 billion was allocated for recurrent expenditure, $231.6 million for capital expenditure, $18 million for the unemployment relief program, and $8 million for CPEP. The overall budgetary allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2020 is approximately 4.3% of the national budget and is therefore consistent with the recommendations of the Dispute Resolution Commission's ruling, which stipulates that the Assembly be allocated at least 4.03% and up to 6.9% of the national budget. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, the overall budgetary allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2020 is approximately $54 million or 2.4% higher than in fiscal 2019. Disaggregated, as it relates to recurrent expenditure, the fiscal 2020 allocation is approximately $54 million or 2.7% over the 2019 allocation, representing approximately 62.4% of our request for fiscal 2020. As it relates to the development program, the budgetary allocation for fiscal 2020 is $231.6 million and remains unchanged over the previous year's allocations, representing 16% of our request for fiscal 2020. Similarly, for the URP and CPEP, the budgetary allocation remains unchanged over the previous years. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, beyond the direct parliamentary appropriation to the Tobago House of Assembly, there is another $978.1 million allocated to facilitate work by several central government ministries in Tobago, in keeping with their statutory obligations under the 6th schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996. These projects are mainly geared towards improving both the security architecture in Tobago and the island's water security. Some of the projects carded for financing under this medium include the completion of the Roxborough Police Station at a cost of $25 million, the construction of the Fire Services Regional Headquarters at Roxborough, and the construction of the Black Rock Fire Station at a cost of $10 million each, the desilting and rehabilitating of the Hillsborough Dam in Tobago at a cost of $10 million, the rehabilitation of the Scarborough wastewater treatment plant at a cost of $10 million, the design and construction of a new passenger terminal depot at Sancta Sil, Tobago at a cost of $5 million. To Deputy Presiding Officer, the Minister also indicated that approval was granted for the first time in our history for the Assembly to raise a bond to the tune of $300 million to finance selected development projects in Tobago. In addition, the Minister also announced plans for the Tobago House of Assembly to access US $16 million from the Andean Development Bank of Latin America, or CAF, to fund coastal infrastructure projects and to address issues arising from coastal erosion, rising sea levels, and other climate change concerns. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, outside of the $978.1 million to be spent in Tobago by central government ministries, the central government also proposes to spend another $870 million as part of the project for the construction of the new A&R Robinson Airport Terminal. And Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, what all of this means is that together with the development program expenditure by the Tobago House of Assembly in fiscal 2020, we can expect close to $2 billion in construction-related activity in Tobago. This project, this increase in construction works is expected to generate increased economic activity and to continue the pace of infrastructural development on the island. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, recognizing that the CDP 2.0, the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan for Tobago, which spanned the period 2013 to 2017, had expired, the Division of Finance and Economy commissioned the preparation of a draft medium-term policy planning framework that would help to guide budgetary policy over the medium term, while the Executive Council considered whether and when it would formulate another comprehensive 5-year development plan. Cognizant of the current resource constraints, which are unlikely to be significantly relieved in the near term, the draft medium-term policy planning framework took the approach of advocating a focused strategy which would be consistent with any long-term development plan and also consistent with the infrastructural development plan. Indeed, several of the consultants who worked on the draft medium-term policy planning framework were also members of the Tobago Infrastructure Investment Committee. The draft medium-term policy planning framework also took careful note of the thrust of the Vision 2030 National Development Plan and reviewed the objectives of the CDP 2.0 development plan for consistency. The draft medium-term policy planning framework has set out the following key objectives. 1, create jobs and shift employment to the private sector. 2, improve productivity through appropriate infrastructure development. 3, build capacity within the public sector. 4, improve food and energy security. 5, restore growth and promote diversification. And 6, environmental sustainability. The key initiatives outlined in the draft medium-term policy planning framework are the execution of up to 3 all-inclusive resort projects to catalyze development. B, the institution of a physical development planning and control to preserve Tobago's fragile ecosystems and to ensure and to ensure environmental sustainability. C, invest in hard and soft infrastructure, especially transportation. D, make Tobago an intelligent island that leverages technology to enhance productivity. And E, to develop Tobago's human capital, including in the public sector. The Deputy Presiding Officer, the draft medium-term policy planning framework envisages several critical roles for the Assembly. These include building awareness for the tourism industry strategy, destination marketing, the provision of incentives and support for tourism-related agricultural enterprises, public-private partnerships for infrastructure development, the implementation of a Tobago Statistics Agency, diaspora engagement, policy formation and promulgation, and the enforcement of physical planning regulations. These undertakings will require budgetary allocations to the appropriate divisions of the Assembly. The draft medium-term policy planning framework is submitted for the consideration of the Assembly and will be approved in due course. Once this process is complete, the revised draft will be put out for public consultation. We envisage a comprehensive consultation process that will include the use of social media, blogs, as well as the traditional town hall type meetings. We anticipate that the discussions will be seeded by specially crafted material which presents the vision of what can be achieved and what Tobago will look like when the plans are implemented. Madam, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Executive Council is conscious that time is of the essence, notwithstanding the fact that we have already lost valuable time as a result of the cancellation of the Sandals Initiative. The intention, therefore, is to move expeditiously but consultatively with stakeholders to the implementation phase of what emerges from the process. In addition, through the Investment Public-Private Partnership Unit, the Executive Council approved the establishment of the Tobago Infrastructure Investment Strategy. Additionally, the Executive Council also appointed a multi-sectoral committee in the Division of Finance and the Economy, consisting of the private sector, civil society, and a cross-section of decision makers. The commissioning of a long-term strategy, as well as the associated medium-term priority investment packages, will serve to guide our development of infrastructure in Tobago over the next few years. Not only will this foster a more transparent and integrated approach to infrastructure planning and investment, but it will also establish best practices for independent assessment, which maximizes values to the taxpayers by more efficiently managing issues such as the availability and cost of project financing, maintenance capacity, judicious planning, and sustainability. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, budgetary proposals for fiscal 2020 were all crafted in the context of the draft medium-term policy planning framework. You may recall that for fiscal 2020, we focused on the following: accelerating economic growth and promoting diversification, creating jobs and enhancing productivity, fostering innovation and creativity, education and human capital development, tourism sector development, expanding food production, development of the cooperative sector, improving healthcare and wellness, housing opportunities, the holistic development of young people, infrastructure and infrastructure strategy, environmental sustainability, crime and safety, and community empowerment. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, we also conducted another budget survey, and I'm pleased to report that the people of Tobago reaffirmed the areas of priority as outlined in our budget statement for fiscal 2020. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, notwithstanding the budgetary funding gaps faced by the Assembly, as an administration, we remain steadfast in our commitment to ensuring that Tobago's developmental momentum is sustained and that the quality of life and standard of living of all Tobagonians, that it is enhanced. Since the presentation of the national budget, our Chief Secretary, the Honorable Kelvin Charles, led a two-day post-budget strategic retreat to revise and reprioritize our development activities for fiscal 2020. The first day included members of the Executive Council as well as Assistant Secretaries, and on the second day, administrators, senior management, and technical staff of the various divisions of the Tobago House of Assembly joined in the discussion. Issues discussed at the retreat included a review of the 2020 estimates, specific plans for expenditure control, key development program project identification and prioritization, and debt management. At the retreat, each division was required to identify its priority projects, and as a team, we deliberated on the merits of each project and arrived at a consensus on the developments which will take precedence for the Assembly in fiscal 2020. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, in considering the wide range of priority projects for the Assembly, we gave primacy to ongoing projects and those for which there is prior approval and commitment, projects for which contractual obligations exist, projects for which tenders have already been invited or received, projects for which pre-investment activities, including feasibility studies, engineering designs, and architectural designs, have been completed, projects that are determined to have a positive impact on employment, economic diversification, the environment, and income distribution, capital projects that are sustainable over the short term and are revenue generating, and projects that are aligned to the medium-term policy planning framework. Mr. Presiding Officer, projects were evaluated and selected on the basis of these criteria, and provision for them is being made accordingly. Please permit me to highlight a few of these projects. The Intelligent Island, $55 million. The Thompson River Bridge construction, $30 million. The Smithfield Connector Road construction, $40 million. Our expanded housing program, $50 million. Construction of health centers, $20 million. The Pigeon Point Heritage Park coastal restoration work, $54 million. Turpin Bend Phase 2, $28 million. The financial complex upgrade, $8 million. Upgrade to community centers inclusive of Charlottesville, $2 million. Delaford, $1 million. And the Scarborough Community Center, $2 million. An expanded agricultural access road program, $60 million. The Charlottesville Vendors Mall, $3.5 million. Repairs to the Pembroke and Castara Youth Centers, $1 million. Construction of the Goodwood Pavilion, $1.2 million. The Shore Park Tennis Court upgrade, $2.5 million. Funding for the University of Tobago, $25 million. And provisions for CPEP and URP of $33 and $60 million, respectively. To Deputy Presiding Officer, a detailed examination of the full range of THA priority projects will indicate two striking features. One, that the projects will impact a wide range of sectors while covering all divisions of the Assembly. And two, the projects are all geared to positively impact the standard of living and the quality of life of all Tobagonians. We therefore propose to treat with the funding gap for fiscal 2020 by doing the following. To limit recurrent expenditure to $1.85 billion and to transfer an initial sum of $150 million to finance our THA priority capital expenditure. We'll also deploy contingency account resources estimated at $150 million at September 30, 2019. We'll also utilize bond financing in the sum of $300 million to fund key development projects and also utilize the $16 million expected from the CAF Andean Bank to fund key coastal projects on the island. And lastly, we will mobilize unutilized balances from previous years, estimated at $15 million. Our overall mobilization efforts will result in an estimated sum of $723.4 million. The Deputy Presiding Officer, these are the primary adjustments we propose to make to our budget as we adjust our fiscal priorities to treat with our budgetary allocation. Together with our DP allocation will result in the mobilization of approximately $954.7 million. The Deputy Presiding Officer, before I conclude today's presentation, please permit me to update this Honorable House on some of the initiatives of this administration to enhance our island's revenue and to reduce expenditure. I speak specifically about our borrowing program, our plans for the use of the PPP modality, our restructuring efforts at Studley Park, and other revenue enhancement measures. I will also provide an update on the Assembly's implementation of an integrated financial management information system and our continuous work with the Auditor General's Department. The Deputy Presiding Officer, as it relates to our borrowing program, which I alluded to earlier in my presentation, the Minister of Finance in his 2020 National Budget Statement announced that approval was granted for the first time in the history of the Assembly for us to raise a bond to the tune of $300 million to finance selected development projects in Tobago. The Minister also announced plans for the Assembly to access US $16 million from the Andean Development Bank Limited of Latin America, or CAF, to fund coastal infrastructure projects and to address issues arising from coastal erosion, rising sea levels, and other climate change matters. The Deputy Presiding Officer, I'm pleased to advise this chamber that official approval was received from the Minister of Finance to issue a bond on the domestic market in the sum of $300 million, in keeping with Section 51B of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, Chapter 2503. The Executive Council has approved the appointment of First Citizens Bank as arranger for this first bond issue, and a mandate has been provided to the bank in this regard to commence the process. The Deputy Presiding Officer, the Assembly is working closely with the Ministry of Finance and First Citizens Bank to ensure that this first bond issue is a resounding success. We anticipate that this process will be concluded by the end of the second quarter of fiscal 2020. As it relates to the PPP modality, The Assembly continues to explore strategies to utilize PPPs to fund selected development projects in Tobago. The Assembly established the IP3 unit in the Division of Finance and Economy, and this unit is tasked with the mandate of engaging private sector entities to execute development projects in Tobago in collaboration with the Tobago House of Assembly. The IP3 unit is at present looking at a range of projects, particularly in the areas of housing, tourism, and health, that seem to be feasible for development under the PPP modality. As it relates to restructuring efforts at Studley Park, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, we continue to see productivity enhancements following the restructuring of the Studley Park quarry and the establishment of SPEL. For 2019, the year-to-date distribution of aggregate was approximately 200,000 metric tons, which has surpassed the total distribution for the year 2018 of 178 metric tons by some 12.2%, or 21,763 metric tons. Using the average monthly distribution for 2019 so far, the projected distribution for 2019 is expected to be approximately 260,000 metric tons. To date, SPEL has barged some 28 shipments of boulders, totaling over 86,000 metric tons for coastal protection projects in Trinidad for 2019. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Studley Park Enterprises Limited realized a total revenue for October 2019 of $2,156,837.84. The total revenue for January to October 2019 is $27,217,816.98. The quarry recorded a year-to-date profit of $7.9 million, which is 320. Sorry, let me take my time and read this over to the Deputy Presiding Officer. I know my colleague will want this news to be announced. The quarry recorded a year-to-date profit of $7.9 million, which is a 329% increase over the January to October period 2018. The profit for 2019 is estimated at $9.5 million. As I said before, I know you would have wanted this news to be broadcasted. So I know my colleague in the IQE, Councillor Kwesi Devines, is elated. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, earlier this year, SPEL obtained an export license to commence the barging of aggregates to Guyana for use on that country's highway development program. It is expected that SPEL will barge approximately 5,000 metric tons per month to Guyana. SPEL also continues to upgrade its equipment and its materials testing laboratory in order to improve productivity and the safety of its operations. The Deputy Presiding Officer, as it relates to implementation of the Integrated Financial Management Information Systems, or IFMIS, we are pleased to announce that the Assembly continues to modernize its accounting architecture and framework through a collaboration with the central government and the Inter-American Development Bank on the implementation of an integrated financial information system. Since my last report on this subject to this Honorable House, the fixed asset inventory module of IFMIS was implemented and demonstrated to the Tobago House of Assembly. This module will be used to define, record, and maintain the asset inventory registration system of the government and the Tobago House of Assembly. It will be demonstrated to all other pilot ministries in the last quarter of fiscal 2020. An electronic version of the business processes of the Tobago House of Assembly was also completed and presented for review and discussion.
Right, members, the speaking time of the Secretary of Finance and the Economy has expired. However, due to the nature of this motion, I'm prepared to allow for some flexibility, so I've asked the Leader of Assembly Business to move the relevant motion.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I would like to request that the speaking time of the honourable member, given the nature of the sitting, to be extended by a further 20 minutes, sorry, and of course, 10 is fine. 10 minutes, and of course, given in all fairness to the sitting, of course, I know the minority leader may require additional time as well.
Right, members, the question is that the speaking time of the member be extended by a further 10 minutes, and that the same time allotted to him will also be allotted to the minority leader as well. All in favor say aye. Any against? Member, continue.
Magnanimous. Thank you all for being magnanimous. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer. The Deputy Presiding Officer, to address significant changes as a result of the implementation of the IFMIS program, a change management strategy was drafted. In the ensuing months, work is expected to continue on the development and rollout of the IFMIS requirements, its traceability matrix, which is the final system design, and the configuration blueprint, building out of the required interfaces and the expected reporting framework and dashboards. By the end of this calendar year 2019, data will be prepared for migration into the test system, and a reference model will be completed for the pilot program and the Tobago House of Assembly, for the Tobago House of Assembly to review in a sandbox environment. Mr. Presiding Officer, I'm also pleased to provide an update on our work with the Auditor General's Department. The Auditor General, who is responsible for auditing the financial statement of the Assembly, is currently auditing the books of the Assembly for fiscal 2016. In light of the financial and manpower constraints, the Auditor General's Department is amenable to the engagement of a reputable private auditor to perform the audit for fiscal 2017 and 2018. Consequently, the Tobago House of Assembly is preparing to issue a request for proposal for the audits of its financial statement for the years ending 30th September 2017 and 2018. Mr. Presiding Officer, as I conclude today's presentation, I wish to reiterate the commitment of this administration to ensure that the island's developmental momentum is sustained and to enhance the standard of living and quality of life of all of Tobago, all Tobagonians and citizens resident on the island. We will continue to manage the island's financial and other resources in a way that will provide and preserve jobs, bring maximum benefit to the people of Tobago. Notwithstanding the fiscal constraints which Tobago, like the rest of the nation, faces, we have the wherewithal, the vision, and the commitment to continue to work towards the development of Tobago. So, Presiding Officer, we have an audacious and progressive program of activities set out in our draft medium-term policy and planning framework. I therefore appeal to all of us in this honorable House that as we beat our chests and boldly declare that we are proud Tobagonians, let us all work together for the overall development and advancement of Tobago. This is our sacred responsibility to our present and to our future generations, and one we should never take lightly. If we do, our children and our children's children will not forgive us. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I beg to move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer. I want to also reach across the corridor and thank my colleague for making a sterling effort insofar as pointing out where they intend to go with the little kakada that was given to them by Trinidad. Indeed, Mr. Presiding Officer, I think he was man enough to point out some of the harsh realities that the PNM executive would face in managing the little resources that they have been given. For instance, it was quite telling for us to note that the recurrent expenditure, whereas it will normally be fully utilized, mostly exhausted, this time around they intend to cut back on their recurrent expenditure to some $1.8 billion. And the question needs to be asked, when they cut back, who would be cut out? Or what would be cut out? I took note of his charm and the way he used a lot of highfalutin words and his posture as if he was speaking the gospel truth. But I saw beyond the fictitious garment a man who is not able to manage the little money that he was given by Trinidad. And I asked myself, why are we putting up with this every year? Why every year we continue to exist as a colony and we somewhat enjoy it? Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I want to point to a few little facts here. Let me just stick and stay a little bit on the recurrent expenditure. You see, in the year 2018, there was a recurrent expenditure, what was actually spent, $1.8 billion. 2018, that was actually spent. We recognize that the personal expenditure on labor, etc., personal expenditure, was about $625 or $626 million. I'm reading from your book. You write books and you don't read them. Mr. Presiding Officer, for notation purposes, I'm reading from a book produced by our Secretary of Finance, Tobago House of Assembly. Draft estimates detail for recurrent expenditure for financial year 2020. And if it serves you any good, I will ask the Secretary to please give you a copy. Apparently, he did not read his own book. He come inside the house here, asking me to quote from his book. So whereas in 2018, they spent $626 million on recurrent expenditures, and these figures will be rounded off to the nearest million. I'm not going into much dollars and cents, because there are persons out there who are listening, and they have a challenge retaining every little detail. So $626 million was spent on recurrent expenditure. That was in 2018. In 2019, they actually spent about $700 million on recurrent expenditure. That's for personal expenditure. It meant to me that the increase in labor, the increase in personal expenditure was something to note. And for 2020, their estimate was 917 million. That's what they estimated for 2020. If my colleague had his way, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, he wanted to spend a total recurrent expenditure of $2.3 billion. That was his intention. That was the intention of my colleagues on that side. Spending spree in an election year. They wanted to spend $3.3 billion. And I recall, with some pain and sadness, I recall speaking to him, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, trying to encourage him to be more realistic. You see, it's one thing to have ambition. It's another thing to deal with reality. And reality is based on natural occurrences. You have to look at the data. Naturally, every single year, the THA have been getting for the last 3 years a recurrent expenditure of about $2 billion. But my good friend on the next side, like he saw a vision. He saw big growth in the economy. Or perhaps he saw 6.9% of the budget coming to Tobago. So he jumped and he said, look, I have a recurrent budget here of $3.3 billion. Now, he's not even utilizing the $2 billion given to him. He's saying that's too much money. That's too much money. I want to utilize only 1.8. You need to tell the House in your rebuttal how you move from 3.3 billion. You discard the 2 billion given to you and you end up at 1.8. Who or what is being cut out in the recurrent budgeting? You must base your thing on reality. And while I was bad enough, I listened to my friend on the next side speak about getting a loan from Trinidad via bond financing. And I said, this is the kind of wickedness that has crippled Tobago economy for years. The type of wickedness that instead of borrowing on the open market, instead of borrowing to suit your plans for Tobago, they must go to Trinidad and get permission. Because that is what internal self-government is. You have to go back and ask permission. Put your hands on your forehead and say, sir, can I please get some money borrowed? And they say, okay, you can get an additional $3 million borrowed. We're going to use bond financing and finance you. But it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Because this THC has shown themselves not able to manage money. That's the point. They are not able to manage money. Year after year, the same finance minister continuously suggests to all of Tobago and all of Trinidad that apart from the little development allocation, there is also an additional 300 million that they can borrow. And I wonder to myself, why was it never utilized? Why is it that from that little kakada, that little 300 or 2.5 in most recent time, $250 million, why is it that at the end of the fiscal year, there's always unspent balances? Is it that Tobago is so developed to the point where it can't be developed anymore? These are questions that needs to be answered. Not using fancy words and posing yourself as a priest, one who is holy. We know the look, but you have seen under your garments. I came to find out on behalf of Tobago today what is being left out. You spoke about what you want to put in, but tell us, from the recurrent expenditure of 1.8 that you want to cut down from $2 billion, what is being left out? Is it that the school feeding program will be reduced? Tell us. Come clean. Tell us. Because for 2020, you estimated 50 million for school feeding program. Is it going to be 50 million still? Or would it be, as it was for the last 2 years, about $35 to $39 million? Tell us. Tell us. What about the Children Authority for Tobago? How is that going? Will the THA contribute towards it? Or they will leave it for Trinidad? We want to understand what's going on with the Early Childhood Center. You allocated $1 million for that. Is that money still allocated? The public wants to know. You must hold yourself accountable to the people of Tobago. They are very much concerned what is being left out. What is being left out of this entire service? People are very much interested in finding out about the development program. What is being put in, who is being hired, who will be fired, because there's talk afoot that you are going to fire people. That's what's being said outside. That you all will fire a number of people. I wish that you all will ascertain that a cut in your recurrent expenditure does not mean the termination of anyone in Tobago. I pray to God that's not your agenda. I pray to God that's not your agenda. Let me just go a little bit further here. This can't be a serious team at all. This just cannot be a serious team. Let's look at some of the development projects. Is the major improvement works to secondary road still on? Is that still on? People want to know. They want to know what's going on. Roxborough Bloody Bay retaining wall. Are you all still bent on spending $6.5 million? People want to know what is being left out of your plans. Just can't come inside and say what you want to do. But what you want to leave out is also part of what should be on your doing list. We observe also that for your development program, when we spoke in June, you had a very high figure. A figure that was so high, you could not see the top of it. 1.4 billion on recurrent expenditure. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, my good friend, Secretary of Finance, is not new at this job. He has been doing this job for some 7 years. And still, he cannot understand average, mean. He can't understand these terms. They are beyond him. And so while he looked at the average over the last few years was about 300 million, 250, between $2 and $300 million for development, he jumped. One time he have gone to 500 million. He went way beyond that to $1.4 billion. I see, well, Santa Claus is coming early. 1.4. That is actually 6 times what he have been given. It's about 7 times, in fact, what he has been given. How do you deal with that? You make such lovely plans to develop the whole of Tobago. You swear we'll become a Dubai in 1 year's time. fast forwarding development. And we say yes, but development must be reasonable. It must be based on reasonable income. And 1.4 billion was unreasonable. He failed to say to us today what will be left out of these development plans. Let me just touch on a few of these development plans here. To improvement of beaches and landing facilities. They spent no money on it last year. Zero. Things bad. The jetty in Plymouth fall down. Tourists is now passing and taking pictures of the jetty. They say, but this from Christopher Columbus? They felt Christopher Columbus pulled up there. This old piece of iron is relic. And they're happy about that. Waiting to damage people. When you go to Palativere, big sign, danger, on the jetty. Jetty not working. In Roxborough, the jetty is just unfinished in Roxborough. So fishermen run the risk of hurting themselves every time they have to move from their vessels on the jetty or from the jetty on the vessel. Incomplete. They had allocated a paltry sum of $10 million. But now that you have working out gymnastics, you want to borrow money, you don't have the money in your hands yet, but you're talking about borrowing money, some 300 million. Tell us exactly how you are going to work with the additional money. Speak first of all to the 200 million you have been allocated for development. Speak to that. Tell us how you intend to exhaust that money. All right? Or to be specific, that $232 million. Tell us how you're going to exhaust that. How are you going to use every single cent? Be detailed with us. We are not ignorant. We are learned people. Tell us how you're going to use the money. But no. You're going to borrow money. Tell us how you're going to borrow money. So let's say you borrow $300 million to put to the money you already have allocated. 232 million. What you have, small money still. 532 million. You know what that is? That's the interchange by KFC along Curep intersection. They want to call it Curep intersection, St. Augustine intersection there. That's that. That's the cost of the highway going from Moruga behind there. That's the cost of the restoration of the Red House. In one single place in Trinidad, they can spend over $500 million in one single place on one lot of land. But all over Tobago, this 300 square kilometers, 116 square miles of land. You need to explain to us how you're going to spend that money. Accountability is very, very crucial. Very, very crucial. So all of our landing facilities are damaged, and we don't know if they're going to spend any money on that. Tobago, let me get it right here. Agricultural access to roads, you are estimated to spend 50 million this year. You only spent 15 million last year. 15 last year. But this year, you have estimated 50 million. We are talking 3 times the amount you spent last year, you want to spend in this election year on roads. I remember telling you, calm yourself down. Calm down. Take it easy. Not listening. We want to know now which access roads will be left out. Because my comrade assemblyman and I, we took a journey up to a newly, freshly cut road in Goodwood. It was on a private piece of land. It wasn't agricultural access roads. But we asked ourselves, couldn't the same man who's cutting a private road for himself, couldn't that man have a vision for agricultural road also, too? With teacher resources? Come on. Let me touch some important areas here. This thing is sad. Goldsboro Agricultural Estate Irrigation Project. The farmers in Goldsboro has always been complaining about not enough water. There are wells there, but no water. And the Secretary for Agriculture swirls in his chair as if he's licking ice cream. Because he knows, the Deputy Presiding Officer, he knows he's a registered farmer, even though he has no crops in the ground, he's a registered farmer. Even though he's an outcast among the farmers, he is a registered farmer. The estimate for that irrigation facility was $8.5 million. We want to know, is that being left out? Or will that be done in the money you have in your hand now? The $232 million. Will that be done as a priority project? Or you are hoping to catch the bird in the bush, and if you catch it, you will do it with that. But Tobago is a place of sayings. As I stand in this chamber, I recall one of his sayings my mother said to me. You going up? She said, Watson boy, a bird in the hand is worth more than two in the bush. She said, a bird in the hand is worth more than two in the bush. If we have $232 million in our hands, that's worth more to us as Tobagonians than the $300 million we have in the bush. So tell us, how do you intend to exhaust that $232 million? Give us in detail. I understand the obsession with making noise. But on June the 19th, we will see who will have the last laugh. It has been said by some that the Egyptians you see today, Comrade Fali, you will not see them anymore. The Red Sea will suck them in. Sea of red. Oh, how I love that story. I love that story. There was monies for the program for the computerization of primary school. That was a big issue this year. To put computer in all the primary schools. And I'm seeing the Secretary of Education, they're looking very pious. This year, they had estimated $2.1 million. Last year they spent $500. Maybe they buy 2 or 3 MacBooks, $500,000. But this year, they wanted to spend 4 times as much in this election year. They plan to. We need to know if that is being left out or you are going full throttle with this school computerization program. You see, what you leave out and what you include is going to tell us your priority listing and how you see the nation of Tobago developing. The establishment of visual arts and performing theaters in primary school. I like this. The establishment of that. We could have some of the best dramatists in our schools waiting to be discovered, waiting for their talents to be harnessed. And definitely, that is where it should start, in the primary school. This year, they estimated $1.8 million. I see very good vision. Historically, they have only spent $500,000. So this year, they want to spend almost 4 times the amount. You want to know if you are going with that. Some of the programs include dance off, movement of beauty and poise, Heritage Quiz, Tobago Arts Festivals, Sandfest, Education, Vacation Experience, and International Voices Program. These are some of the programs they want to squander the money on. Nothing that is sustainable. Nothing. Then they wanted to expand Goodwood High School. Good idea. $1 million was allocated to that. Would it be still expanded? Over the last 2 years, they spent $200,000. In this election year, they jacked the price up to 4 times that. It's here in your book. Don't look so amazed. You write it. Your book that you gave to us. You're writing books and don't read. How do you want to pass the exam? Expansion of Speyside High School. And I want to just take time out to recognize the greatness of Speyside High School football team. I think they were in the quarterfinals. Assemblyman's Valley, that's your era? Shake your hand on that. Let the record show. Just want to take time out. And so the expansion of that school, Speyside High School, is a good thing. 800,000 was allocated to that. Last year, they spent 200,000. 4 times the amount again. They jack it up by. Will that be left out? There's a place called Tobago Development Community College. A place associated with Dr. Winston Murray. And I've observed that for the past 3 years, well, the past 2 years, 2018, 2019, no money at all was allocated to that college. Is it the end of that college? Can we put the tombstone now? Is it the end of it? In this year, there's nothing. Is it the end of the efforts by one of our own Tobagonians, a man who we recognize as paving the way for us today here in this House of Assembly? He paved the way. A man who did a great job in ensuring that Tobago House of Assembly members were not only looking after Tobago's business, but that they were actually paid. A man who stood up and fought for Tobago relentlessly down in Trinidad. Came up with a college. No allocation for his college. Not last in 2018, not 2019, and God help us, not in 2020. Nothing. Not even $1. It's sad, it's sad. I'm seeing here, let me speed on here. I think I've gotten the point. I went to the West the other day, to Milford Court, and what I saw left me in a daze. The commercial plaza could do some touching up. All right? And I'm seeing here where in 2020, the PNM Executive Council sees the same need. And so they estimated $3 million for the upgrade of the Milford, the revitalization of the Milford Court Commercial Plaza. We want to know, are you still going to spend that $3 million? Yes or no? The expansion of Roxborough Town, Phase 2, $10 million. How could you expand town with $10 million? Eh? When the Prime Minister just built a residence, 1 2x4 house, which is now the most expensive house in Tobago, $17 million. Let me drop it like it's hot. And then he goes out to tell the public he's going to invite Tobago to come and celebrate with him. $17 million. No wonder we don't have enough money here. $17 million. It worries me. $17 million on a house that nobody lives in. He just comes up there once in a while, as he spends most of his time in his sheep farm when he comes. And $17 million just to dirty a sheet. But the expansion of Roxborough town, a whole town, where 5,000 people live, $10 million. $10 million. It's here in your book. Don't look trouble. Read your book. Page 40. It's in your book. You want to expand the town with $10 million. But the Prime Minister, just to go and sleep one night and dirty a sheet, $17 million. And he boasts. But not only in the people in the East getting wood, people in the West getting wood too. Friendship, estate, land development. No money has been spent not in 2018. None has been spent in 2019. And in 2020, they estimate to spend $1.5 million. I want to know that is to what? Pay a watchman or to build a shed? Eh? That's how you're going to fool the people along there? And even if so, are you still going to pay the watchman or build a shed? This is development under the PNM executive team. And this development plan was to cost the country $1.4 billion. Let me leave this book. The book is trouble. I get in pain in the chest right now. Let's read it from this book. Pain. Wow. Wow. Let me look at the book of revenue. Because without money, you can't do nothing. So we love to spend. Some people like that, eh? Just give me. But they don't know where the money coming from. Like little children. Give me. I want. But they don't know where the money is coming from. Hence, our parents in the 60s and 70s used to say, you think money growing on tree? Because obviously it doesn't grow there. Money is not a natural progression of society. It's not natural. It's natural for money to be depleted, not for money to be regenerated. For it to be regenerated, you have to go out and do something. You have to be industrious, which is lacking among the PNM Executive Council. And I'll show you why it is lacking in this revenue book. Grossly lacking. So for the year 2020, and I've listened to my colleague, let's pause. I listened to my colleague. He did not say to us how much revenue they intend to make. He's talking about they're going to borrow loan. Bond financing. And how they get some little roti money from some US company. 16 million. He's happy about that. He's twirling his thumb. Yummy. 17 million, 16 million US. Yummy. People are laughing at you. 16 million US. I read so many papers where the Prime Minister make a call that cost a couple money, to the president of Trump. I have to get that clipping to see how much it cost. A couple million. So let's get to this. The revenue that can be earned by tax, $212 million. That's the revenue. That's real small money. Eh? When you just check that, Republic Bank spoke of $1 billion in revenue. They don't buy, they don't sell anything. They just take my little money and invest it. Right? But they don't buy and sell. They don't sell conkers. They don't sell oil. They don't sell gas. They just take your money and invest it and generate income from that. $1 billion. When When you look at some of the car companies in this country and the kind of money they make, billions too. Some of the companies in this country, they make plenty of money. How is it that THA, which is a corporate body that can engage in business, is not doing well insofar as generating revenue? And we are sitting down here and writing that all we can generate, possibly generate, all we can possibly, because this is futuristic, all we can possibly generate for 2020 is $212 million. I say leave the chair, vacate the office, you all ain't ready yet. With all the level of intelligence you have on that side and outside, that boast and say that party card members, they went to this school and that school. If this is the collective wisdom of your people to just generate $212 million, I say you all are colossal failures. In a place where you are spending $2.3 billion, all you can generate is $212 million from taxes, something is wrong. But altogether, that is how much you can get from tax and non-taxable. Not even taxes alone. Tax and non-taxable, $2.12 million. Now let's leave all them taxable and non-taxable and come down to THE. Let's see what kind of money does THE generate. I'm seeing from this book here that the Kendall Farm School would have brought in $120,000. $120,000 in 2019. And $100,000 in, come again. I'm seeing from this book here, in 2018, Kendall Farm School would have made $95,000. That's good. Kendall Farm School, producing. In 2019, 120. So something is happening in Kendall Farm School, in that profits are increasing. But I'm also recognizing that the tractor pool seemed to be doing good also too. In that in 2018, they brought in $53,000, and in 2019, $80,000. But what I'm somewhat disappointed in is our quarry. Based on this information here, in 2018, the quarry brought in $149 million, $149,000. $149,000. Yes, it's in your book. Page 28. $149,000 in 2018. In 2019, $150,000. How come you are telling us today the quarry brought in $9-point-something million when all we are seeing here is a couple thousand of dollars here? We want to find out. Give us the detail. And I'll give way. I'll give way.
Was restructured, and there's a new company called Studley Park Quarries Limited, and I read out the figures in detail. If he's so desirous, I can give him a copy of the information instead of peddling misinformation as he has from the start of his presentation. Thank you.
I see that thumping these desks very hard. There's no money put aside to repair these desks when you all mash them up. This is a THA that Comrade Farley will have to lead. Please do not damage the desk with your heavy hands. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I await the documentation, sir, to show us the new revenue you are creating here. In the meantime, let's look at some revenue that they failed to operationalize. Botanic Station, the sale of plants. Zero, zero, zero money. No money at all. Botanics right down the road. They have made no money from the sale of plants for the last 2 to 3 years. No money. Is it that the soil in Tobago is poor? Isn't that there are no workman employed? How could we come to this house when buying plants is a big thing throughout Tobago and Trinidad? Because you're encouraging people to go in farming. And you are saying there's no sale of plants from the botanic station. Sale of fish and fish products. No revenue generated from that. We are fighting to say, look, this is our waters, so we can exploit the resources inside it. Not just oil or gas, but the fishes also. That's a big thing in the world today. China exports tons of fish. Canada, America, tons of fish. How much money has been made from fish and fish products? I'm seeing here, 0, 0, 0. 2018, 0. 2019, 0. 2020, they estimate 0 for 2020. Yeah. But also the sale of apiary products is also 0. We have some of the best honeys in the world. My good friend right there in the back road of Cutler Hall will say to us, he will say to us, the thing is doing good. We have good farmers in Tobago here. But yet, for revenue generation, you put 0, 0, 0 on this. No money. The THE doesn't expect to make no money from this. Hence, you are not spending money to develop the fishing industry and the apiary industry. Let's look at rental lease of state lands. That is something that's supposed to be making money. Right? But I'm seeing this year, you have cut down on it. This year, you have put the figure to $150,000 revenue from that. I thought with the increase of everything, you may have tried to make some more money from that. Rental of the gazebo. Millions was spent building that gazebo. It is said 5 million was spent building that gazebo down in Botanic Gardens, making the most expensive gazebo in the Caribbean. People was encouraged to get married underneath there, to have retreats underneath there. But consistently, they keep putting the figure at 20,000, sorry. 20,000. If a man has a 2-bedroom house and he rents that for 2,000 every month, by the end of the year, he will have $24,000. You are renting the gazebo. And every year, you put the revenue at $20,000. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, it's a sad day in Tobago when we look at the Division of Education, Innovation, and Energy. It's a sad day in Tobago when we look at that division under revenue, page 30, and there's no vision at all for that department, none. And that department is led by our Chief Secretary. But there's no vision there. No vision. When I look at this, and I look at 2018, that division made no money, no revenue. But education is money. Education is money. I'm seeing here under revenue, actual revenue between October, September, -0. In 2019, they approved none and they made none. Visionless. Visionless. But they will soon find out what it means to be visionless on January 2020. On the 19th of January 2020, you will find out the pains of being visionless. In 2020, no allocation has been made to bring in revenue. All these 2x4 schools in Trinidad are making money. They could tell you how much money they generate when the year comes. Because education is money. We have a secretary in charge of education, innovation. So even if education is played out, let's try innovation. Come up with something new. Dead. Energy, dead too. We just find 3.5 trillion cubic feet of gas. And the expert says that in 2020, that gas find can produce 1.5 billion gas per day, which will strengthen what we already have, which is just over 3 million per day. They produce something like that. And to hear that this department is responsible for energy puts zero. I'm tired. I'm tired of speaking to people who want to listen to themselves. Tobago is tired. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, Tobago is saying to my colleagues on the next side, call the elections now. Do not delay. We're tired of bad management. We are tired of fake politicians. We are tired of people operating as a beggar maid. We're tired of people who have degrees but no understanding. We're tired of that. If this is regarded as a second budget, where is my documentation? Where is my booklet to go home and reflect upon? Where is? If this is a second budget, if this is a budget that is now tailor-made to suit the figures that you were tossed out to by Trinidad, should not tossed out to you. Show us the documentation. Don't just talk to us glibly language. Every person who presents here today, I challenge them to make your speech available. Make it available so we can critique it. I thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I thank you, team.
Assistant Secretary, Community Development, Enterprise Development.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer. I feel humbled and honored to be able to participate in today's discussion relative to the plans, projections, and the systems which will be enforced to ensure that we continue along the path of Tobago's further developmental agenda. You see, from where I sit and from where I now stand, I believe that we have done good, that we have done reasonably well in carrying the work of improvement further for the people of Tobago. I know that there are some languages that aren't permitted in the House and that parliamentary privilege does not allow for certain types of conversations to be had. And so I exercised a little bit of intelligence and I decided to refer to one of the wisest philosophers I know, Dr. the Honorable Google, to come up with synonyms for the word foolish. Words such as absurd, ill-advised, insane, irrational, ludicrous, preposterous, ridiculous, unreasonable, brainless, doltish, feeble-minded, unwitty came up. And I thought that perhaps that would be a good way to start a presentation in response from what we would have just heard on the other side of the divide. So, in respect of that Deputy Presiding Officer, I thought that in response to the nothingness that we heard, it may have been wise to sit down, having said nothing at all, as an appropriate response. But because I have a responsibility to the people of Tobago to speak the gospel of this administration and the good news about what we have been doing, I have decided to tailor-make my presentation so as to be able to do justice to the people without overindulging in what we would have heard before.
So permit me, therefore, in the most practical, in the most observable of ways, to be able to cut my presentation in half and speak to this. Madam Deputy Presiding Officer, sir, the Division of Community Development, Enterprise Development and Labor continues to be the hub around which we believe Tobago's further development agenda is going to take place. In our division, we've recognized the need for the building of strong families. I'm talking from half presentation here. Strong families, sustainable communities, and a healthy, productive workforce. With a mission geared towards transforming the quality of lives of our people by mobilizing and empowering communities, protecting economic diversification, and respecting our core values. Among our core values are teamwork, accountability, transparency, honesty, integrity, and respect. Deputy Presiding Officer, sir, before I go on to speak to the things that we have in place relative to the advancement of the work which we've been doing so far, permit me, even in her absence, to recognize and commend my substantive secretary, Assemblyman Marcelin Melville Jack, for the excellent stewardship of the Division of Community Development, Enterprise Development and Labor. I am happy to be in receipt of a confidence today to be able to make a presentation in respect of the work we do there. The allocation for the division I speak on behalf of, in respect of the development agenda, is $11,750,000, with a recurrent of slightly over $62 million, totaling slightly over $74 million in allocation to this division. It is, in fact, a reduction from the numbers which we sought after in terms of what was initially sent to Finance and then to Trinidad. But even so, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, we've come a long way because as a division and as an assembly, we have proven time and time again, 3 times since, that we can do more with less. That we can do more with less. But in respect of the fact that Tobago's allocation would have been significantly reduced in respect of the request that was made, the member opposite stood here and said, vacate your office, give up your seat, and leave. In other words, because we would have asked for a certain amount and would not have gotten that amount, we unfit to lead, and therefore, playing on the type of leadership that comes to bear in the organization they represent, they decided that the best thing to do would be to punish ambition. And so because the Secretary for Finance had a vision, and because the Secretary for Finance had an aspiration, and because the Secretary for Finance had a dream that wasn't entirely lived up to, we would send him home. And I can tell you this, Deputy Presiding Officer, that is the kind of thinking that got 12 members of staff from the PSA fired but reinstated by the court. In the Division of Community Development, we continue to do more with less. In 2016, there was a situation where just over 600 persons graduated from the Vocation Skills Training Program. When we came in 2017, we were able to take that number slightly below 1,000, in the 900s, nearer to 1,000. In 2018, we was able to move that figure past 1,100, nearer to 1,200 persons. And this year, we can pride ourselves saying with certainty that we would have printed 1,400 certificates for 1,372 participants, some of whom duplicated the skill sets that they were interested in. In other words, Madam Deputy Presiding Officer, sir, the people of the island of Tobago are beginning to recognize by this administration's doing that they must be responsible for their own destinies and have been moving closer to positioning their lives to ensure that they could benefit from the quality of life that is deserving of them. Deputy Presiding Officer, sir, it is against this background that I want to make a little boast about some of the things we've been doing in my half presentation. We would have successfully hosted 2 Metro programs. Metro, of course, being an initiative or an acronym for multifaceted, assertive, caring, honest, and outstanding men. The idea, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, was to ensure that we create an environment in communities and within families where boys and men have an opportunity to have conversations about things affecting their masculinities, to be able to have open and honest dialogue about the things that affect them more directly, and in an environment that does not allow for judgments to be passed or criticisms to be made. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, these 2 initiatives were held in the communities of Bethel and Plymouth, with overwhelming support by the men and boys in those communities. Because the system was such that we felt that our men and boys were in trouble, more egregious trouble than our women, we had put priority emphasis on ensuring that we lend our supports to ensuring that they have a better opportunity and are more equipped to appoint their lives in a particular way. We paid close attention to the fact, because we are an administration that listens to the concerns of the people and take their views on board before further decisions are made, we would have listened to the public and recognized there is a need for the reinstitution of the I Am Woman initiative. Woman, an acronym for wise, outstanding, motivated, adventurous, and noble. And so this year, we are going to take to the communities of Tobago both the Metro program, in which we intend to rebuild the block, and the I Am Woman initiative, in which we intend to provide support for our women and our girls. This comes to bear eloquent testimony of the fact that this administration thinks through our plans and our processes to ensure that you, the people of Tobago, can be in receipt of the best possible care on the social level, in respect of your health and the likes, in respect of your education and the likes. I was actually hoping that this presentation, this sitting, would have been different to all the other sittings I've come to. Hoping that the minority leader would have been present to participate in all of the debates that were happening here today. But I'm not surprised that he isn't, because he has a history of speaking and leaving the chamber, abandoning his responsibility to the people of Tobago. There was one particular instance where we were negotiating in this house the establishment of a code of conduct that will hold members to the highest standards of behavior, and the member refused to participate in the conversation and went and held what attempted to be a press conference right down in the park not too far from here. Reports have been given that on other occasions, the member would have gone across by the bar not too far from where we are sitting, by Brown Betty Bar, not too far from where we are here right now, to be able to have trivial conversations, trying to bad-talk this administration, as opposed to lending his voice to the integrity of the discussion, advancing the intellectual history of this chamber. And so he left today. He left today. And that is the same person who is aspiring for leadership on the island of Tobago. And I wonder what will happen if we were to be so irresponsible as a people to make him our island's leader. What would happen if he came across a contrary opinion or a different view? perhaps he might get up and leave the office or put you out in his authority. But we don't practice that type of leadership over here. You see, because from where we sit as an administration deputy presiding officer, we understand that we must hear the other points of view, to hear other people's questions, to know their assessment of us, because we understand that from their particular points of view, we may indeed see our own basic weaknesses and we would grow and learn from their wisdom. But that is not the type of responsible leadership that comes to bear on that other side of the room. Before I go into all of the plans and projections, I want to be able to just say to you quickly that my contribution will be narrowed to the initiatives of the Department of Community Development, the Department of CPEP, OSH, Labor, the Business Development Unit, and the Building and Maintenance Unit. I will, of course, start with the Building and Maintenance Unit because this seems to be the area that generates the most interest in respect of how we treat with the business of securing, improving, and maintaining our community facilities and the likes. And so the list of ongoing projects for 2020 in respect of the maintenance, upgrade, and in some instances, construction of new community facilities is as follows. There will be, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, upgrades to the Pembroke Community Center, enhancements initiative in terms of beautification and completion of the construct to the Golden Lane Community Center, upgrades to the Blackrock Community Center, the Charlottesville Community Center, Scarborough Community Center, as well as the Delaford Community Center. There will, of course, be strategic enhancements initiative to a number of community centers. These include Rescato, Bethel, and Patience Hill. Full refurbishment is anticipated, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, for the Glamorgan Community Center. In respect of CPEP, the Community-Based Environmental Protection and Enhancement Program, CPEP, we continue there to provide landscape services, even at the newly completed Bell Garden Multipurpose Facility and other community-based facilities across the island of Tobago, and would have hosted, multiple green markets where the sale of fresh produce, fruit trees, and seedlings was affordable to the people of Tobago. We anticipate, in respect of CPEP, that in 2019-2020, that we will embark upon a series of income-generating activities geared towards making the program all the more viable. Some of the proposed initiatives includes, but are in no wise limited to, the operationalizing of the Rescato Heritage Bakery, which will be a project of the community of Rescato under the auspices of the CPEP team there. The propagation and sale of ornamental plants and seedlings, the production of compost material, mulch, and grow boxes, and the provision of landscaping services to persons. In respect of the Business Development Unit, we would have given out as achievements grants to the tune of $1,028,145.49 to a number of persons totaling 47 businesses would have benefited from this, and a loan amount to 8 persons of just over $500,000. We too would have hosted the Christmas Village in 2017 and in 2018 with over 50 vendors participating in this initiative. We too would have hosted the Tobago Roadshow at Twin City Mall in 2019, where 30 entrepreneurs were afforded the opportunity to showcase their products to the Trinidad market, and their success stories continue to encourage and inspire us. We too would have gone on to Expo Caribe, where we sought opportunities to be able to penetrate the Latin American markets and are making waves there to ensure that in the not too distant future, not only will our products be available in the markets there in a larger way than it's already done, but that it would allow for Destination Tobago to be promoted in a real and in a strategic manner. We propose, in respect of the Business Development Unit in 2019-2020, to engage in strategic partnerships with Cariri for the implementation of product testing here on the island of Tobago. We intend to continue our participation in the Trade and Investment Convention, TIC. We intend to continue, in fact, this year we will be continuing in our Christmas Village Exposition in 2019, which will be held in December at the Gardenside Car Park. I want to use this to appeal to all persons here in Tobago to come and lend your support by patronizing our persons there, our vendors there, to ensure that we create, as it was, a circular economy on the island of Tobago from which you will be able to benefit, all of you and all of us. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Occupational Safety and Health Department, OSH, continues to provide support for the divisions across the Assembly. I want to just say quickly, because of the poor powers of the OSH in respect of its present configuration, we only have the gravitas or the teeth to operate internal, which is in the Tobago House of Assembly. However, in the individual capacities, members of staff have been going to their respective communities and keeping trainings and having conversations about how communities can be mobilized to engender a spirit of safety and well-being in that respective community. And so we have staff who are going beyond the call of duty. We have staff who aren't prepared to come and work from 8 to 4 or 7 to 5, as the case may be, but instead, when their business is done, go back to their community and pay the additional dues freely and voluntarily. And I want to commend them for doing such. The Labor Department continues to lend support to persons to ensure that they benefit from decent work environment and decent work engagement contracts, and to ensure that the decent work to which they are entitled to by the Constitution and the law is not compromised in any way. In addition to which, we have established in that department a manpower resource unit that allows for unemployed persons to bring their resumes, to bring their qualifications and their certifications, that we can help them pursue employment opportunities in state and in private enterprises. So far, if memory serves me correctly, I can say that over 400 persons have engaged the services of the manpower resource unit, and of the 400, almost 300, or by now slightly over 300 persons have been appointed. And so this department or this unit is conducting themselves well, and persons are benefiting from their clairvoyance and their assistance. It goes without saying that we are on the road to transforming the quality of lives of the people of Tobago. I want to continue to make appeals for the people of Tobago to be able to examine what befalls you critically and objectively. We would have heard earlier today one member mention that a bird in hand is better than two in the bushes. And I want to say to you, even though the analogy that was born in respect of that statement was a misrepresentation of truth, it is true that a bird in hand is better than two in the bushes. And so I want to encourage the people of Tobago to protect your patrimony, to protect what you have, to put up a strong defense against persons who are trying to erode the quality of lives that you enjoy, to ensure that you continue to partner with the Division of Community Development, Enterprise Development and Labor, and all other divisions in the Tobago House of Assembly to ensure that you continue to benefit from quality leadership and excellent services. You see, as a young man growing up, I always thought that high standards of living and certain luxuries could only be afforded persons born into a certain community of influence or a certain kind of family. I'm wiser now, I'm older now, and I understand that fortune favors the brave. I want to encourage all of you, the people of Tobago, to go confidently in the directions of your dreams. You, of the 1,372 persons who would have graduated from the Vocation Skills Training Program this year, you now have skills that are entrepreneurial. Use the skills and the information gleaned from these services to be able to pursue the quality of life deserving of you and your families. Seek out avenues to establish cooperatives by which you would be able to enter into business operations. We continue as a division to provide you with soft fundings in respect of our grant and loans facilities, and we are saying make the most of it. Gone are the days when a man would just have a skill, set up a private company, and try to eat all the food available to him. We are saying the time has come where we have to share our resources, lend our expertise, participate and collaborate to ensure that we carry the work of improvement a little further in respect of Tobago's developmental agenda. I want to also make an appeal for you, the people of Tobago, to use and take advantage of all the opportunities which will be afforded you. You see, I know with certainty because I've been a part of the negotiation that there has been a tripartite initiative established amongst the divisions of community development, agriculture, and URP. I know with certainty that hundreds of persons have been trained in modern approaches to agriculture and agro-processing. And I'm saying to you to continue developing yourselves and your skills. We have an environment now where we have entered into partnerships to ensure that persons with informal trade skills that would have been learned by their uncles and by their godfathers and skills learned by aunties and nene would have an opportunity to formalize these informal trade skills towards certification through what is called the Prior Learning Certification Program or the Workforce Assessment Program. We also have opportunities where persons can now engage in Roxborough as well as in Bonaccord or soon to come Bonaccord, where persons will be able to go and formalize these skills in our trade centers and in workshops in our communities. And I'm saying to the people of Tobago that despite all the successes of this administration, our best days are still ahead of us. That we have not lived our best days yet. And for some, the frustrations associated with displacement, for some, the agony associated with the slow pace of development in respect of your immediate needs and concerns, you might feel daunted. You may feel to throw in the towel. You might feel to give up the block. But I'm saying to you today that our best days are still ahead of us. Continue to lend your support. Continue to participate. Continue to make the most of all that we have to offer as a people. And when the day is done, you, like me, will be able to sing, not just great is the PNM, but great is this administration that has done well. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Members, it is now 21 minutes past 12, and I think now is a good time to have lunch. So this sitting will now be suspended for 1 hour and resume at exactly 22 minutes past 1 o'clock.
There are hidden stories about Tobago's history tucked away in the memories of men and women who served in the Assembly. They hold the key to unlocking some of the knowledge surrounding Tobago's legislative history. The Assembly Legislature Secretariat is an apolitical division that oversees the plenary sitting on the fourth Thursday of each month, where the public can view debates on Tobago's affairs. But Tobago's legislative authority did not begin with the current Tobago House of Assembly. The first formation of the legislative representation was in 1768 at the island's former capital, Georgetown, now Studley Park, with a 13-member elected House of Assembly, a lower house and the appointed Legislative Council, and the upper house. 1 year later, Scarborough became the island's new capital, and consequentially the seat of Tobago's politics was relocated. These were during colonial times, when the operations of the Assembly favored the European settlers. The abolition in slavery in 1834 was the catalyst for empowerment throughout the world. Tobago was not exempt from this movement towards self-rule. In 1877, representative government was abolished, with the Crown Colony introduced to handle the administration of the island. In 1889, Tobago was joined with Trinidad by the British government. The Tobago House of Assembly was created by Act 37 of 1980 for making better provisions for the administration of Tobago and for matters therein. It comprises 7 divisions, each representing a developmental concern. THA has legislative arm and the executive arm. In addition to 10 divisions, 9 with particular remits, plus the Office of the Chief Secretary, which oversees the others. There is so much to learn, and to help you do this, the Secretariat now has an archive project for all assemblymen from 1980 to present. Today we start with a few officials who served in between 1980 and 1988. In 1980, the Assembly was led by a chairman. At this time, it was Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson, now deceased.
That 1977 motion by A.N.R. Robinson, which led to the creation of the current Tobago House of Assembly by Act 37 of 1980, because I understood the need and the desire for Tobagonians for self-determination. I appreciated the effort, and I somewhat associated with that greater autonomy for the people of Tobago. So I understood the struggle, I understood the reason, and therefore, while the PNM contested that election in 1980 and lost, we won 4 seats and the then DAC won 8, I understood the need for greater autonomy for Tobago.
At that time, there were 2 political parties represented in the Assembly. Mr. Kalenda was on the minority side held by the People's National Movement, but control of the House was with Mr. Robinson and the Democratic Action Congress.
We are the architect of self-government for Tobago, and the Parliament would have decided that Tobago should have its internal self-government in 1977. However, when the legislation was passed in Parliament, and that legislation, as you know, is Act number 37 of 1980, to give effect to the decision of Parliament, it stopped woefully short of giving us international government.
And that has always been our mantra. From 1984 to all our years, internal self-government was foremost in our mind. And that's even why A.N.R. Robinson went to Parliament and debated on internal self-government for all those years. And that is why instead of giving us internal self-government, they gave us this partial management of Tobago, which is more of an administrative kind of a situation.
As a lot of people do not know, we worked for about 5 to 8 months without a salary. The central government in Trinidad didn't care to give Tobago House of Assembly, and so they were not working for harmonious relationship between the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government.
From the year 1980 to present, administrative changes have been made to ensure that the Tobago House of Assembly expands to make responsibility for more of the day-to-day matters on the island.
Well, of course, most of it are administrative changes. First, there was no executive council when it started, because the executive council is usually the government responsible to the legislature.
At that first THA elections, our inauguration took place what is now the High Court. It was then Tobago's Hall of Justice, was on the only court out at Bacalet. So our inauguration took place there, and our plenary sittings took place there. Most of our committee meetings took place at the Fairfield complex. So that's how we operated, and we operated in committee stages. Like, there was a health committee, a roads committee, and all those various committees. All members of the Assembly then, though, operated as members of the Finance and General Purposes Committee.
There was no executive. The executive was the plenary and the Finance and General Purposes Committee. So anybody else who functioned would have functioned on a committee, and these committees, by way of their deliberation and the reports that they bring, these reports are brought to the Assembly in plenary, and it is the discussion and debate on that and the approval of that that you can now implement. Very frustrating, because, as you know, we were no longer a county council. Then we started the restoration of this building that we now occupy. We begin since in 84, and so on. And we went to England, sent people to England to do the research as to how the building was when it housed the first Tobago House of Assembly in the 1760s, 1763, 1769. And then we were able to restore the building to how close to what it used to be, because some of the things we couldn't get. And in 1985, we completed that record timing, 4 years. And Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, if you notice the plaque next door, would have come and unveiled that plaque to mark the opening of this particular chamber, and then we were able to meet here. It was not easy, because this building at that time was occupied by the library.
The Assembly building has since been through further restoration in 2010, but the building was not the only feature undergoing changes. A lot of effort was made to change the laws that govern the Tobago House of Assembly. This meant getting Parliament to change the Constitution.
I think the most significant one was Robinson motions in 1977. in the assembly between 80 to 84, there was that motion by Dr. Jeff Davidson. Subsequent to that, after 1995, between 91 and 95, there was an attempt by the Manning administration, while Chairman Denoon was chairman of the assembly, to grant Tobago greater autonomy. Unfortunately, while efforts were made and legislation were drafted, there was a call for early elections, so that effort fell by the wayside. And then there were again another effort, again led by Robinson, now part of the NAR, that created Act 40 of 1996, which took it a step further. But during that period, during the first period of the assembly, we operated, to me, as a hybrid of the Tobago County Council, because there was not the positions of chief secretary or secretaries.
We had to set up systems. We did this first by creating what is called an administrative body. And this is the forerunner of the Executive Council. The administrative body was responsible to the legislature at that time. But in 1996, the change had changed, the old act went out and the new act came in, creating an executive council run in which the chief secretary was the chairman. But prior to that, the chairman was responsible both for the legislature and what passed for an executive council.
The chairman of the Tobago House of Assembly was responsible for the executive and the legislature. Since 1996, the positions of chief secretary and presiding officer were created. The chief secretary leads the executive council that manages Tobago's administrative matters, and the presiding officer oversees the legislature. But the chairman was not the only position that changed in 1996.
My office as a leader and responsible for setting up the new structure for the new assembly that was put into being by Act number 27, 1980 was in the Sandy Hall building. So the clerk of the assembly was there, and the clerk then was what we now call the chief administrator. And the secretary office was next to me. The secretary is now what we call the clerk of the assembly. That was the secretary. And in fact, it was Mr. Roach. So all of us were in this small building in County Hall. I am the politician responsible for putting the administration in accordance with the new law. And they were actually one the secretary of the assembly as plenary, and the other one as the chief administrator, head of the public service. Because of that kind of situation, we have to find accommodation, and we have to make it quickly.
The background of politicians may vary. Miriam Caesar Moore started as a nurse. Her desire to help people took an unexpected turn into politics.
People's home was on fire. And as a nurse, everything just kicked in. I ran up to the hospital, I called the fire department, ran up to the hospital. And there we were able to bring out some people, save people from that blaze. I was asked to come on the TV to speak about this matter. They were interviewing me. And I guess A&R Robinson, I don't know if he saw it or what, but I know because of that incident and the fact that I came and helped and was assisting, probably people saw that as someone who can do something, can be of service for Tobago.
Life as an assemblyman had its own challenges.
For us to get anything done for Tobago in our portfolio, we had to actually be like not bullies, but we have to say, if we fought for this, it is ours and we are going to make it happen. So when they withhold, sometimes for months we didn't get pay As I said, we work for $2,500 a month, and it took you a while to get it because, again, of the logistics and the bureaucracy. And it is heartening that we did not give up. We kept at it, we stayed with it, and now Tobago is reaping the benefit of the Tobago House of Assembly.
During that term, interestingly, there was a motion moved by Jeff Davidson. I think it started in late 1982, which even at that time, although we were operating under Act 37 of 1980, still called for greater autonomy for the people of Tobago. That motion went as far as to say that if the government of Trinidad and Tobago did not accede to the desire of the representative of the people of Tobago, then Tobago should seek to move to full independence with its own territorial waters. And that is to tell you the depth and to the extent of the struggle and the desire of those people at that time. So today, as we continue this debate after 37 years, I think it's the same call. You're witnessing the same call and that burning desire, because Tobagonians still feel that they are not given the opportunity to govern themselves.
So we felt that we were onto something big, and that Tobago was really, we felt a part of Tobago, and that is why I tell people, I tell my children, that you really don't understand this history of Tobago until you can birth it, you have it in your soul. At that time, we, the Assemblymen, had it in our soul, in our souls. We felt that even though we have to give our lives, we have to give our time and our energies for this new baby, we were prepared to do that. So the Tobago House of Assembly became a part of us, and in extension, Tobago became a part of us. So people may look at that as being insular. Some people may say, oh, well, Tobago, that small place, you know, why all this emphasis on Tobago? This is what other people were saying. The Trinidadians were saying that they couldn't understand why we want to be different. History made us different. We didn't choose to be different.